The twilight hour had transformed the streets of Millbrook, Georgia, into a treacherous maze. 24-year-old Emma Clark's fingers trembled so violently she nearly dropped the paper sack clutched against her chest. Each heartbeat thundered in her ears, or would have, if she could hear it, and the figure in the dark jacket, the shadow that had haunted her every waking moment for 14 days, remained there, maintaining his distance of roughly 20 feet. His footsteps synchronized perfectly with hers. Today's mistake had been catastrophic. Racing to grab essentials from the neighborhood market, she'd abandoned her phone on the kitchen counter, still plugged into its charger. Just a brief stop, she'd reasoned. 5 minutes, perhaps 10 at most. How much could possibly go wrong? Everything. Absolutely everything. Emma's veins turned to ice the moment she emerged from the store and spotted him standing across the pavement. The dark jacket, those predatory, calculating eyes tracking her movements like a wolf studies wounded prey. She accelerated her pace. He mirrored her speed. She veered right. His trajectory matched. She nearly sprinted. His rhythm never faltered. She couldn't detect whether his footsteps were drawing closer. She couldn't shout for assistance. She couldn't even know if sounds were escaping her throat. And her phone, that singular lifeline, capable of bridging her world with the hearing one. That device, which could have summoned help, sat uselessly gathering dust several miles away. The sidewalk was emptying as dusk descended. A young pair strolled past, lost in their private universe. Emma rushed toward them, her hands moving desperately through the air. "Help me, please. Someone's tracking me. I'm terrified." The couple observed her with bewilderment that rapidly transformed into unease. The woman tightened her grip on her handbag. The man offered an apologetic headshake, and they hurried past, clearly comprehending none of her urgent gestures. Emma's lungs constricted painfully. She glanced backward. The figure in the dark jacket had abandoned all pretense. He stared directly at her now, a slow, horrifying smile creeping across his features. He understood. He knew her options were evaporating. She ran. Her legs carried her toward the commercial district where businesses remained illuminated, where humanity still moved about. She noticed an older gentleman securing his tool shop and rushed toward him, her hands flying frantically through space. "Please contact emergency services. That person is stalking me. Please." The older gentleman squinted at her movements, then shook his head with genuine sadness and gestured to his ear. He couldn't comprehend. He patted her shoulder with kindness, said words she couldn't decipher from his lips, and departed toward his vehicle. Tears flowed down Emma's cheeks now. The dark-jacketed predator leaned against a streetlight across the road, observing her struggle, biding his time, patient. He recognized she was imprisoned in a waking nightmare where she could observe everyone but make nobody observe her. That's when she noticed it, the inviting luminescence of Morrison's coffee house spilling onto the darkening pavement. Through the expansive windows, she could distinguish people within, groups, partners, solitary individuals absorbed in books or computers. Someone inside had to comprehend her. Someone had to intervene. She burst through the entrance with such force that multiple faces rotated. A server shouted something, but Emma was already advancing, approaching the nearest booth she encountered. A woman in her 50s sat with a teacup and a newspaper. Emma signed frantically, her hands quaking. "Help me, please. Someone's following me. I'm deaf. Please help." The woman's eyes widened with alarm, but without understanding. She raised her palms helplessly and summoned someone, likely her spouse, who appeared looking equally confused and concerned. Emma moved to the adjacent booth. A cluster of university students glanced up from their textbooks, their youthful faces reflecting confusion and uncertainty. "Can anyone comprehend me, please? I'm in danger." One student retrieved his phone, perhaps attempting to locate a translation application, but his companions were already displaying discomfort, shifting restlessly, clearly uncertain how to respond to this distressed woman making incomprehensible gestures. Emma felt the final strains of hope dissolving through her grasp like water. She stood surrounded by humanity, yet utterly isolated, invisible, silent in a manner that transcended her deafness and encompassed everything about the barrier separating her reality from theirs. The coffeehouse entrance opened behind her with a gentle chime. She didn't need to turn to identify who had just entered. She could sense it, that frigid presence that had been haunting her for 14 days. that had transformed her existence into a living nightmare. He was inside now. The final sanctuary was no longer secure. Through her tears, through the haze of panic and desperation, she surveyed the space one ultimate time. And that's when she noticed him, a man seated near the window with a small girl, perhaps 4 years of age. Unlike everyone else who had regarded her with confusion or sympathy or discomfort, this man was observing her with something different reflected in his expression: concern, attention, comprehension. Something about how he was watching her made Emma move toward him. Desperation, instinct. She approached his booth, her hand shaking so severely she could barely construct the signs, her vision blurred with tears, her breathing coming in jagged gasps. But she forced her hands to communicate. Please help me. That person, he won't stop following me. He's been stalking me for weeks. I don't have my phone. I can't call for help. Please. For an instant, time appeared to freeze, and then the man raised his hands and signed back deliberately, distinctly, ensuring she could comprehend every word. I understand you. You're safe now. I'm going to help you. What's your name? The relief that flooded Emma's expression was so intense, so overwhelming it nearly shattered her. Her entire frame sagged. Her knees almost buckled. For an instant, her hands couldn't construct words whatsoever. They simply trembled in the space between them, suspended in a moment of pure, desperate gratitude. Someone comprehended her. Someone perceived her. She wasn't invisible anymore. Emma, she finally signed, tears cascading down her cheeks. My name is Emma. I'm Daniel. The man signed back, his movements fluid and natural, as though he had been signing his entire existence. Stay right here with me and my daughter. I won't let anything happen to you. Sophie, sweetheart, this kind lady is going to sit with us for a bit, okay? She's having a very frightening day, and we're going to help her. Okay, Daddy, Sophie said, her small face suddenly grave in the way children become when they detect something significant is occurring. Is a bad person being mean to her? Something like that, sweetheart. I need you to stay right here and be very courageous. Can you do that for Daddy? Sophie nodded solemnly. Daniel stood and guided Emma into the seat beside Sophie, positioning himself so he could observe both the entrance and the man in the dark jacket. He signed to Emma as he moved. I'm going to tell them to call emergency services. Don't worry, he's not going to touch you. He walked directly toward the counter where a young barista named Rachel was cleaning the cappuccino machine. His voice was quiet but urgent, every syllable deliberate. Call the police immediately. That man near the entrance has been stalking the woman at my table. She's deaf and doesn't have her phone. She's been attempting to get help, but nobody understood her. Don't let him leave. Rachel's complexion went pale, but she was already reaching for the telephone beneath the counter, her hands moving swiftly as she dialed. Daniel returned to the booth and sat across from Emma. He signed to her, his movements calm and steady despite the adrenaline surging through his system. The police are on their way. Can you tell me more about what's been happening? Emma's hands were still trembling, but she managed to sign back. Each gesture weighted with weeks of accumulated terror. He's been following me for 14 days, outside my workplace, at the bookshop, at the grocery store, outside my apartment complex. I reported it to authorities, but they said they couldn't act without evidence. Today was my day off. I just went out to grab a few things. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't think I'd need it, and then I saw him again. He followed me for blocks. I tried to get help, but nobody understood me. Nobody could hear me. The final sign here carried a significance that transcended the physical act of hearing. Daniel's jaw tightened. You did the right thing coming in here. You're not alone anymore. Sophie, who had been observing the exchange with fascination, tugged on Daniel's sleeve. Daddy, why is the nice lady talking with her hands? She's deaf, sweetheart. That means she can't hear sounds the way we do, so she talks with her hands instead, and I learned how to understand her a long time ago because Uncle Marcus talks the same way. Sophie's eyes widened with wonder rather than confusion. Like Uncle Marcus? That's so cool. She turned to Emma with the pure, unfiltered compassion that only children possess, completely unburdened by the awkwardness that made adults look away. Don't be sad, nice lady. My daddy is the best helper in the whole wide world. He even fixed my teddy bear's leg when it came off. And now Mr. Button's as good as new. Emma couldn't hear the words, but she watched Sophie's animated little face, the way her tiny hands moved with emphasis, the way her eyes sparkled with earnest reassurance. And somehow, despite everything, despite the terror still coursing through her system, despite the man in the dark jacket 15 feet away, despite 14 days of existing in fear, she felt something warm expanding to her chest. Daniel signed to Emma what Sophie had said, and Emma released a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Something beautifully human and broken and healing simultaneously. Your daughter is precious, she signed. She's my whole world, Daniel replied. And something in the way his hands formed those words told Emma there was a story there, a profound one. But that was for another time. The next several minutes felt like hours stretched impossibly thin. The coffee house had grown quieter, the normal chatter subdued as people sensed something serious was unfolding. The man in the dark jacket must have realized something was wrong because he started moving toward the entrance, attempting to slip out unnoticed. But before he could escape, 2 police officers entered, alerted by Rachel's call. The coffee house had grown completely silent now, everyone watching as the officers approached the man. One officer spoke briefly to Rachel, who pointed toward Daniel's booth and then toward the man attempting to leave. The other officer moved to block the exit. "Excuse me, sir. We need to ask you a few questions." The man in the dark jacket's expression changed from calm to angry, to something almost desperate. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just getting coffee. Then you won't mind answering a few questions." The officer who had spoken to Rachel approached Daniel's booth. Daniel stood, positioning himself between the officer and Emma, and began interpreting everything that was spoken, his hands moving fluidly as he translated the conversation. It turned out the man's name was Robert Jennings, and when the officers ran his information, warning signs started appearing immediately. He had prior arrests for harassment and stalking in 2 different states, Alabama and Mississippi. He had apparently fixated on Emma after observing her at the bookshop several weeks ago, and he'd been watching her, studying her routine, waiting for the perfect moment that would have arrived tonight if she hadn't walked into this coffee house, if she hadn't found someone who could communicate for her. "Ma'am, you're very lucky," one of the officers said, looking at Emma, even though she couldn't hear him. Daniel interpreted, his expression grave. "If you hadn't found someone who could communicate for you tonight, well, we've been looking for Mr. Jennings in connection to another case. He's dangerous." The officer didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Everyone in the coffee house understood what he wasn't saying. As they led Robert Jennings out in handcuffs, the coffee house erupted into murmurs and gasps. Several of the people who hadn't understood Emma earlier now approached her with apologies, with offers of comfort, with guilty expressions that said, "I'm sorry I didn't help you." But Emma barely noticed them. Her eyes were fixed on Daniel, this stranger who had somehow become her guardian angel in the span of 15 minutes. "Thank you," she signed. And then the dam broke completely. She cried, deep shuddering sobs that shook her entire frame. 2 years of existing alone after her mother's passing from complications of pneumonia. 4 years before that, of navigating a hearing world that often forgot she existed. 14 days of living in fear, of looking over her shoulder, of feeling hunted, and today she had almost become another statistic, another name in a news report, another young woman who disappeared because she couldn't scream loud enough. If she hadn't walked into this coffee house, if she hadn't seen Daniel at the window, if he hadn't known sign language, the alternative was too horrible to contemplate. Sophie tugged on Daniel's sleeve, her little face scrunched with concern. "Daddy, is the nice lady still sad?" "She's feeling a lot of things right now, sweetheart. Sometimes people cry when they're relieved, not just when they're sad. Can I give her a hug? Hugs always make me feel better when I'm scared." Daniel looked at Emma and signed the question. "My daughter wants to know if she can give you a hug." Emma nodded, fresh tears spilling over. And when Sophie climbed down from her chair and wrapped her little arms around Emma's waist, something inside Emma healed just a little. Something that had been fractured for a very long time. "It's okay, nice lady," Sophie said, patting Emma's back the way Daniel always patted hers after a nightmare. "The bad person is gone now, and me and Daddy will keep you safe. Right, Daddy? That's right, sweetheart. Daniel signed to Emma what Sophie had said, and Emma hugged the little girl tighter, her tears falling into Sophie's soft brown hair. I don't know how to thank you, Emma signed when she finally composed herself enough to pull back. You saved my life. You don't owe me anything, Daniel replied, his hands steady and sure. I'm just glad you found me. But even as he signed those words, Daniel knew it was more than that. Something had shifted in the universe tonight. Something had clicked into place. He didn't understand it yet. Didn't have words or signs for it, but he felt it deep in his bones. This wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. Over the following weeks, Daniel found himself thinking about Emma more than he expected to. It started practically. He gave her his number so she would always have someone to contact in an emergency. Someone who would understand her. He helped her navigate the legal process of filing a restraining order against Robert Jennings, interpreting for her at the police station and the courthouse. But somewhere between the police station and the third courthouse visit, something changed. Emma started appearing at Morrison's coffee house on Saturday evenings. At first, she asked if it was acceptable, if she was intruding on their father-daughter tradition. But Sophie had been absolutely delighted at the prospect of seeing the nice lady again. And Daniel realized he looked forward to those Saturday evenings in a way he hadn't looked forward to anything in a very long time. Sophie became obsessed with learning sign language. She would practice throughout the week, then demonstrate her new words each Saturday with the enthusiasm of a child discovering magic. Daddy, watch, Sophie would say, her little fingers carefully forming signs she'd been rehearsing. Friend, then happy, then love. Did I do it right? Did Miss Emma see? Was it perfect? Emma would clap and praise her, signing back encouragement and corrections, and Sophie would beam with pride so bright it could illuminate the entire coffee house. I'm going to learn all the words, Sophie announced one evening, her face scrunched with determination. So me and Miss Emma can talk about everything, like princesses and unicorns, and why the sky is blue and why clouds don't fall down even though they're so puffy. Daddy, do you know how to say unicorn with your hands? Daniel demonstrated the sign, and Sophie practiced it 17 times in a row until she got it exactly right on the difficult days. And there were many for Emma. Daniel was there when she had nightmares about Robert Jennings finding her again, about being chased through empty streets where nobody could understand her screams. Daniel would text her at 2 in the morning. You're safe. He's in jail. You're not alone anymore. When she felt isolated at family gatherings where nobody else signed, where cousins and aunts and uncles would converse around her but not to her, Daniel would stay by her side, interpreting conversations, ensuring she was included, ensuring she never felt invisible again. When she doubted herself, when she wondered if she would ever feel truly safe again, if she would ever stop looking over her shoulder, if she would ever trust the world again, Daniel reminded her of her strength. You survived. You fought. You found help. That takes more courage than most people will ever need to have. And in return, Emma brought light back into Daniel's life in ways he hadn't even realized were missing. She helped Sophie with art projects, revealing a natural talent for painting that made the little girls squeal with absolute delight. They would sit together at Emma's small apartment, painting wildflowers and imaginary creatures and portraits of Daddy being the strongest man in the world. She taught Daniel new signs ones Marcus had never used, regional variations and poetic expressions that expanded his vocabulary in ways that felt like discovering new colors in a painting he thought he already knew. And she listened, truly listened, in that profound way that had nothing to do with ears and everything to do with presence. When he talked about things he hadn't spoken about in 2 years, it happened one evening, 4 months after they'd met. Sophie had fallen asleep in the booth, her head resting on Daniel's lap, and the coffee house was nearly empty. The waitress was wiping down tables in the back, and the soft jazz music playing overhead created a bubble of privacy around their booth. Can I ask you something? Emma signed. You don't have to answer if it's too personal. You can ask me anything, Daniel replied. Sophie mentioned her mommy once. She said her mommy lives in heaven with the angels now. Daniel's hands stilled for a moment. Then he took a deep breath and began to sign. Her name was Christina. We were high school sweethearts, one of those ridiculously young love stories that somehow actually worked. We got married at 21, had Sophie at 27. She was the kind of person who made everyone around her better, kinder, happier. His hands paused, and Emma waited patiently, giving him space. She had a heart defect she didn't know about, something she'd had since birth, but it never caused problems until it did. One day, she was dancing with Sophie in our kitchen, laughing at some silly song on the radio. 2 weeks later, I was standing in a cemetery holding our daughter's hand, trying to explain why Mommy wasn't coming home. "I'm so sorry," Emma signed, her eyes glistening. "It's been 2 years. Some days are better than others. But Sophie saved me. She gave me a reason to keep going when I didn't think I could. Every time I look at her, I see Christina's smile, Christina's laugh, Christina's big heart, and I know I have to be enough for both of us." "You're an amazing father," Emma signed. "Anyone can see how loved Sophie is. You're not just enough, you're everything she needs." Something in Daniel's chest loosened at those words. Something that had been wound tight for 2 years finally began to breathe again. "What about you?" he signed. "You mentioned losing your mother." 2 years ago, Emma signed back. "Complications from pneumonia. She was only 52. It was just the two of us. My father left when I was young, couldn't handle having a deaf daughter. My mother learned sign language, became my advocate, my interpreter, my best friend. When she died, I lost the one person in the world who truly understood me. Until now." Daniel signed. Emma looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them that didn't need words or signs of recognition. A connection, a sense that maybe, just maybe, they had been brought together for a reason neither of them could have predicted. 6 months after that terrifying evening in the coffee house, Daniel found himself standing outside Emma's apartment building, a bouquet of sunflowers in his hand, her favorite, he had learned. His heart was pounding almost as hard as it had the night they met, but for entirely different reasons. When Emma opened the door, her surprise shifted quickly to curiosity. "What are you doing here?" she signed. "Is Sophie okay?" "Sophie's fine. She's with my mother for the evening. I'm here because I needed to tell you something, and I needed to do it alone." Emma stepped back, letting him into her small but warmly decorated apartment. He handed her the sunflowers, and she buried her face in them for a moment, before setting them carefully on her kitchen counter. "What did you need to tell me?" she signed, her hands betraying a slight tremor. Daniel took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that could change everything or nothing. The moment that could open a door or close one forever. "I know this might seem sudden," he signed, "but I've been thinking about this for a while. I think I fell in love with you somewhere between the coffee house and now. I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't know if it was too soon after Christina, or if you'd think I was only with you out of gratitude. Or if I was crazy for feeling this way about someone I've only known for 6 months." He paused, his hands suspended in the air between them. "But then I realized that life is too short and too unpredictable to waste time being afraid. You taught me that. You walked into that coffee house 6 months ago with nothing but desperation and courage, and you changed everything. You brought light back into my life. You gave Sophie someone who understands her in ways I never could. You made me remember what it feels like to want something for myself, not just for my daughter. And what I want is you." Emma stared at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst through her chest. Tears were already streaming down her face, but she was smiling. That beautiful, heartbreaking smile that Daniel had come to love more than he thought possible. "It's not sudden," she signed back, her hands shaking with emotion. "I've been waiting for you to say it. I've been in love with you since the third Saturday when Sophie spelled my name wrong in sign language, and you corrected her so gently, so patiently. I've been in love with you since you stayed up until 3 in the morning texting me through a panic attack. I've been in love with you since I realized that when I picture my future, you and Sophie are in every single version of it." Daniel closed the distance between them in 2 steps and pulled her into his arms. They stood there in her small kitchen, holding each other like they were the only 2 people in the world. The sunflowers forgotten on the counter, the evening light fading outside the window. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel signed, "There's someone else who wants to ask you something." On cue, There was a knock at the door. Emma looked confused, but when she opened it, there stood Sophie holding a handmade card covered in glitter and stickers. "Surprise!" Sophie shouted, then immediately switched to signing as she'd been practicing. "We love you. Will you be part of our family?" Behind Sophie stood Daniel's mother, grinning widely, clearly in on the whole plan. Emma scooped Sophie into her arms, card and all, and the four of them stood in the doorway, a family that had found each other in the most unexpected way, built on understanding and second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't ask permission before changing everything. 3 months into their relationship, on a quiet Tuesday evening after Sophie had gone to bed, Daniel sat across from Emma in his living room. There was a heaviness in his eyes that Emma had seen glimpses of before, but had never fully understood. A shadow that crossed his face sometimes when he watched Sophie playing. A tightness in his jaw when she asked him about the future. "There's something I need to tell you," he signed. "Something I should have told you a long time ago, but I didn't know how. I was afraid." Emma's heart tightened with sudden worry. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he began to sign. "6 months before I met you, before that night in the coffee house, I took Sophie to the doctor. She had been having trouble hearing her teachers at preschool. I thought maybe it was ear infections. Kids get those all the time, right? Simple. Treatable." He paused, his jaw working as he fought to maintain composure. "They ran tests. A lot of tests. Hearing tests, genetic tests, scans, and they found something." Emma felt her chest constrict, already dreading what was coming. "Sophie has a progressive genetic condition, something Christina carried but never knew about. It never manifested in her, but she passed it to Sophie." The doctor said. His hands faltered. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "They said she'll likely lose her hearing completely by the time she's a teenager. Maybe sooner. They can't know exactly when, but it's inevitable. My little girl is going to go deaf." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible and heartbreaking. Emma thought of Sophie, bright, bubbly, beautiful Sophie, who sang silly songs in the car and giggled at cartoon voices and called out, "Daddy, watch!" every time she learned something new. Sophie, who was learning sign language not as a fun game with Miss Emma, but as preparation for a future without sound. "That's why she's learning sign language," Emma signed, the realization washing over her in waves. "That's why you've been teaching her. You're preparing her." Daniel nodded, his tears slipping down his cheeks now, his composure finally breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to think I was only with you because of what you could offer her, because that's not true. I fell in love with you, Emma, everything about you. But I also know that Sophie is going to need someone who understands what she's about to go through. Someone who can show her that being deaf doesn't mean her life is over. That she can still be happy. That she can still be whole." He looked at her with raw, devastating vulnerability. "I'm terrified, Emma. I'm terrified of watching my little girl lose something so precious and not being able to stop it. I'm terrified of not being enough for her when it happens. I learned sign language for my brother, but this is different. This is my baby. This is my whole world, and I don't know how to prepare her for a silence she's never known, for a world that might not understand her, for all the struggles I've watched you face. I don't know how to save her from this." Emma was crying too now, but she reached across and took Daniel's hands in hers, steadying them. Then she pulled back and signed slowly and deliberately, making sure he understood every single word. "When I was 7 years old, I woke up one morning and the world was silent. No birds singing outside my window. No cars driving past. No sound of my mother making breakfast in the kitchen. I screamed, but I couldn't hear my own voice. I thought I had died. I thought I was trapped in some kind of nightmare that I'd never wake up from." She paused, steadying herself against the memories. "For years I grieved. I grieved for music. I would never hear again, for laughter, for my mother's voice reading me bedtime stories, for all the sounds I didn't even know I would miss until they were gone. I was angry. I was lost. I felt broken." Her hands moved with more intensity now. "But then I discovered something. I discovered that silence has its own kind of beauty. I discovered that my hands could speak louder and more eloquently than my voice ever did. I discovered that being deaf didn't make me less. It just made me different. It gave me a different perspective, a different way of experiencing the world, a different kind of strength. She squeezed his hands again, her eyes fierce with conviction. Sophie is going to grieve, and that's okay. That's healthy. That's human. But she's also going to discover a whole new world, a world I can show her. I can teach her that silence isn't emptiness. I can teach her how to listen with her eyes, how to speak with her hands, how to feel music through vibrations in her chest. I can teach her that the deaf community is beautiful and vibrant and full of people who will understand her completely. I can teach her that she will never, ever be alone. Tears were streaming down both their faces now. And most importantly, Emma continued, I can show her what you've been terrified she wouldn't see, that she can still be happy, she can still fall in love, she can still achieve her dreams, she can still be whole. Because I am whole, Daniel. My deafness doesn't define me. It's just part of who I am. And Sophie's deafness won't define her either. Daniel broke down completely. He pulled Emma into his arms and held her like she was the only thing keeping him from shattering into a million pieces. When he finally pulled back, he signed with shaking hands. I thought I saved you that night in the coffee house, but I think maybe you were sent to save us. Emma smiled through her tears, signing back. Maybe we were sent to save each other. From that day forward, everything shifted into sharper focus. Emma threw herself into preparing Sophie for the transition ahead. But not in a way that felt heavy or scary. She made learning sign language feel like discovering a superpower, like unlocking a secret code that only special people could understand. She took Sophie to deaf community events on weekends, picnics in the park where children and adults signed and laughed and played together. Weekend gatherings where nobody felt left out or different. Storytelling sessions where deaf performers used their entire bodies to bring stories to life in ways that spoken words never could. Daddy, look, Sophie said one Saturday afternoon, bouncing with excitement after a community picnic. Her hands moved rapidly as she signed. I made a new friend named Lily, and she taught me how to say butterfly and rainbow and best friends forever. She demonstrated each sign with exaggerated enthusiasm, her little face glowing with pure joy. Daniel watched his daughter, so full of happiness, so completely unafraid of what was coming, and felt something loosen in his chest. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there, hovering at the edges of his thoughts. But it was no longer suffocating him. It was no longer the only thing he could see when he looked at his daughter's future. Because Sophie wasn't just learning to be deaf. She was learning to be part of a community. She was learning that different didn't mean less. She was learning that she would never be alone. Emma also started teaching Sophie practical things: how to feel vibrations in music by putting her hand on a speaker, how to use visual timers and alarms, how to advocate for herself when people didn't understand. But she did it all through play, through games, through activities that felt fun rather than frightening. One evening, Emma brought over a keyboard and showed Sophie how to feel the vibrations of different notes through the wood. Can you feel this one? Emma signed, playing a deep bass note. Sophie put her small hand on the keyboard, and her eyes went wide. It tickles. Do another one. They spent an hour playing with sound as vibration, with music as something you could feel in your bones rather than just hear with your ears. And when Daniel tucked Sophie into bed that night, she signed sleepily. Miss Emma says music lives in your heart, not your ears. I like that, Daddy. Me too, sweetheart. Daniel signed back. Me too. Months passed, like pages turning in a book you never want to end. Sophie's hearing continued to decline, gradually. Some sounds becoming muffled, some frequencies disappearing entirely, but she adapted with the resilience of childhood and the support of two people who loved her more than life itself. She started using hearing aids, which she decorated with sparkly stickers and called her magic ears. When other kids at school asked about them, she would explain proudly in a mixture of spoken words and signs that they helped her hear better, and that she was learning a special language with her hands. Most of the kids thought it was the coolest thing ever. A few didn't understand and said mean things, but Emma taught Sophie how to handle that too. Some people are scared of things they don't understand. Emma signed to her one afternoon after a particularly hard day at school. But that's their problem, not yours. You don't need to make yourself smaller so other people feel comfortable. You just need to be yourself. and the right people will see how amazing you are. Sophie hugged her tight and signed, "You're the best, Miss Emma. I'm glad Daddy found you." "I'm glad he found me too," Emma signed back. "Actually, I'm glad I found both of you." On a crisp autumn evening, exactly 1 year after the night Emma burst through the coffeehouse doors in terror, Daniel took both Emma and Sophie back to Morrison's coffeehouse. They sat at the same booth by the window, the same booth where their lives had changed forever. Sophie, now 5 years old and wearing her sparkly hearing aids, had a plate of chicken nuggets arranged into a smiley face in front of her, just like that first night. But this time there was no fear, no panic, no desperation. Just three people who had found each other against all odds. "Daddy," Sophie said, tugging his sleeve, "can I say something to Miss Emma in sign language? I practiced really, really hard, and I want it to be perfect." Daniel nodded, his heart so full it felt like it might overflow. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Sophie turned to Emma, her little face scrunched with concentration. Slowly, carefully, with the deliberateness of a child who wants to get every gesture exactly right, she formed the signs. "Thank you for teaching me. I'm not scared anymore. I love you." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled Sophie into her arms, holding her tight against her chest, rocking her gently. "I love you too," Emma signed when she could finally compose herself. So much." Daniel watched them, his daughter and the woman he loved, both of them crying and laughing and signing and hugging, and thought about fate. About that terrifying evening a year ago when a panicked woman burst through the coffeehouse doors and changed their lives forever. About all the coincidences that had to align perfectly for them to find each other. If Emma hadn't left her phone at home, if she had chosen a different coffee house, if he and Sophie had stayed home that night instead of keeping their Saturday tradition, if he never learned sign language for his brother, if any single element had been different, they never would have found each other. But they had, against all odds, despite all the fear and pain and grief that had brought them to that moment, they had found each other. Daniel had thought he was saving Emma that night. He had thought he was the rescuer, the hero, the one who swooped in and made everything better. But the truth was so much more beautiful than that. Emma had saved them too. She had saved Sophie from facing her future alone. She had saved Daniel from drowning in fear about something he couldn't prevent. She had saved their small family from isolation, from grief, from the weight of carrying their burdens alone. They had saved each other, and in doing so, they had built something neither of them could have imagined a year ago. A family bound not by blood or tragedy, but by understanding, by choice, by the quiet language of hands that speak directly to the heart. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the darkest moments can lead to the most beautiful connections, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that they're never truly alone, that understanding can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the people we're meant to find are the ones we meet when we're at our most vulnerable. Leave a comment telling me about a time when a stranger became important in your life, or when someone understood you when no one else could. Your stories matter, and I read every single one. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.